This regular business meeting of the Littleton City Council. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Brinkman.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Valdez.
Present.
Councilmember Cole.
Here.
Councilmember Driscoll.
Here.
Councilmember Elrod.
Here.
Councilmember Fay. And Councilmember Schlachter. We have a quorum.
Okay, will you please rise for the pledge?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Council, any changes to the agenda? Clerk, please note for the record that Councilmember Fay has arrived. Thank you.
She has arrived.
Okay. This is point in the meeting where we hear public comment. If you wish to address the City Council under public comment, please sign in on the public speaker forum before the call to order of the meeting. It's the green sheet that's always on the back table. City Council, each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. The City Council is not authorized by the Colorado Open Meetings Law to discuss the comment or take action at the meeting on any issue raised by public comment. The mayor may refer the matter to staff to obtain additional information and report back to the council as appropriate. We have one person signed up on comment, and that's John Watson. John?
Thank you, Mayor. John Watson, 4500 West Hinsdale Avenue, District 4, across from the many apartments on West Mineral, originally zoned retail. Got that in. Thank you, Mayor, and Councilman Driscoll for setting up the Columbine Square Advisory Group. I don't know if we've had a lot of impact, but we're glad to do the job to try to make sure that the demolition continues on pace and all the assorted issues with that project will try to be resolved. I'm glad to help and serve, and doing that brought up several other issues that we'd like to talk about. The two principal ones are an ordinance for greater impact fees and an ordinance for the abatement of nuisances. We don't seem to have one. The only remedy for abatement of nuisances is a 6-foot fence, and as we know now from seeing Columbine Square languished for years, the homeless weren't deterred by that fence, nor were the graffiti artists or the drug users or the fire starters, the arsonists, and the various and sundry people that hang out there. So we clearly need an abatement nuisance ordinance. I've been requesting it politely in my mind, and I will probably start making more frequent appearances, much to your chagrin, on that subject and doing proposed ordinances. And thank you, City Manager Mark Ralph, too, for your assistance on trying to get the impetus going for this. On the impact fees, we're going to have 3 major projects. We're going to have the Bellevue Corridor project, we're going to have the NSER project, and we'll have the Mineral Station plan, all of which impact my area. And I wanted to discuss impact fees. I have several different charts that I probably don't even have time for now to be able to discuss impact fees. I want to talk about how if we look at impact fees around the area, I have Brighton's, for example. I don't know if we're as good as Brighton. If you want to find Brighton, I have to go to Commerce City, keep going north on 85 till you see the implement stores. I think we're as good as Brighton or better. I have a conglomeration of fees for Brighton. Trust me, they amount to about $6,000 in Brighton if you go through the 3 pages of Brighton. Well, you've got Colorado Springs. They've got a conglomeration of fees and charges that will add up to about the same, $6,000, $7,000 in Colorado Springs. I think we're as good or better than Colorado Springs. Let's talk about other jurisdictions and their impact fees and how they compare. This is a chart from Boulder. It discusses 8 Boulder area impact fees. You'll see that Boulder's are $8,500 and Longmont, that beautiful city if you go west, that I don't find to be superior to the city of Littleton, charges $13,000 and change for an impact fee. Personally, I paid $11,000 in Boulder, or in Aurora 11 years ago, and that doesn't compare. Ours, as I finish, an attempt to stay within my range, $36.97. They should be 10 grand. We're going to have 3 projects coming on. We need an appropriate impact fee. You see the subject areas. There are more subject areas we can plan. I'll have a deaf ear on about our need for road improvement funding when we aren't collecting adequate impact fees and using them for that purpose. Thanks so much.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, Sean.
No one else has signed up to speak. Is there some? Kent?
Mayor and Council, my name is Kent Bagley. I reside at 1467 West Briarwood Avenue and have for 25 years. My purpose for being here tonight is to say thank you for some things that are being done and to thank a specific person for something as well. You have a full plate for a new council, and some of those items that you're working on, of course, the fire service changes, the Pell study on Santa Fe, and also the comp plan update. Jerry and I have been involved in that before. Those are a mouthful. I've been involved in 3 other things that are going on, having attended some meetings that relate to the mineral station framework, and I like to call it the framework guide, because framework kind of leaves it just sort of hanging. I think that you're going to get that in front of you, and I know the Planning Commission has worked on that. That's a real critical element. The Bellevue Corridor Plan, I think, is absolutely critical, and I attended a meeting about a month ago, and what I found very interesting is that there were people there from Englewood and also from Bomar, sitting at the table that I was at, so that it's not just your issue. You're reaching out and touching some other communities like Bomar and also Englewood. And I laud you for the efforts that you're doing to reach out to other communities that are adjacent, whether that's counties or cities. The Pell study is a great example. Another topic which needs to get kicked off is the housing study, which will become a piece of the comprehensive plan in the future, but the implementation of the housing study is absolutely critical. So I want to thank you for all those efforts. That's a lot of work for a council that's really been seated for a little over 3 months. I want to thank Councilman Valdez for your courageous vote a year ago. Other members of this council were on that vote too, and that was to preserve urban renewal in the Bellevue Corridor and the potential for that as a pilot. That was a courageous vote on your part, and I thank you for that, because it leaves it as an opportunity and a tool that can be utilized in the future, and it can be tested by you as the council and the staff. So those are the comments that I wanted to make, so thank you very much for your service.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
City Clerk, I believe that the TV that's in the lobby the sound is on, yeah. Thank you.
The new TV.
The new TV.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else who would like to address council? Pam?
My name is Pam Chadbourne. I live a block in, so the button needs to be pushed.
Go ahead and go.
The clerk's not at her desk. Go ahead.
My comments are about the mineral station area framework, and I'll agree with Mr. Bagley. It is a framework guide. There is not much frame or structure here. I say this as a person who planned projects, and I want more. I don't want to criticize. I'm not here to do that. Let me just point out a few things. First off, something good, Chapter 6, character design, has laudable statements. However, I've seen a lot of positive statements be cherry-picked out of the presentations that are brought to quasi-judicial hearings. And I've been going to most of them for like 2 years. So I'm concerned about that. I'm glad they're here, but let's make sure they have equal weight with the rest. Second of all, I really love the section that mentions other documents. But I have a couple of comments, and one is City of Littleton Citywide Plan 2014 articulates the goals of the community, and my comment is it does not. I was there, I've been here since then. It does not articulate the goals of the community. These are the goals of the Planning Commission and a few other people. Also, it does mention the South Santa Fe Corridor Plan 2000. The thing I'd like to see respected is the South Platte River Corridor Development Design Objectives. They're in 2000. I've seen those ignored in decisions recently made. Those need to be considered. They are very important to the character of the community, back to Chapter 6. So I'd like to see that explicitly mentioned. The Pell section is interesting, and it kind of, I guess, identifies future work. Will identify future concerns and constraints. And the constraints will be those associated with transit. My comment is that you've got to have population and use projections for the whole region. And that's kind of cool. I think a college student could probably do that. I hope we get that started, and I just wanted to point out that the appendix mentions this entire region, and there's nothing in the document that really mentions studying that region, but that's vital to understanding the growth in the Pell. For the transportation section, besides considering the growth in Douglas County, Jefferson County, and Denver, we need to, this keeps being left out, the circulator or connector bus. Thank you, Councilmember Cole, for always bringing this up, but please, we've got to get that into our plan and a way to fund it. It is a great way to work around the last mile solutions from light rail stations, and it is state of the art, and we should have it. Finally, for land use, it's great to say it'll anticipate commercial and residential development. Again, let me mention, the region is huge, but it's very possible to bound those possibilities, and that's what we need to be doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Seeing no one, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Turn that off. Okay, consent agenda. Any item can be pulled by a member of council. First is Resolution 18. This is a resolution requesting coverage under the FPPA defined benefit system for police officers for the City of Littleton. Resolution 19 is a resolution supporting the reauthorization by the General Assembly of the Colorado Lottery Division in 2018. Resolution 18-105, ID-18-105 is a motion to approve the cancellation of the June 19th, 2018 and July 3rd, 2018 regular City Council meetings. Resolution 20 is a resolution regarding the adoption of the Mineral Station Area Framework. ID 18-100 is the approval of the March 6, 2018 regular meeting minutes.
So approved.
I need a second.
Second.
Okay, ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Recognize Kyle is here.
Yep. Okay, clerk. Councilmember Schlechter's arrived. Thank you. He's in the house.
Surprise.
Okay, we have nothing under general business, so we'll go into our second readings and public hearings. The first one is an ordinance on second reading amending Ordinance 23, Series 2017, known as the Annual Appropriations Bill. And I believe, Tiffany, would you mind giving us a quick presentation or a little definition?
Sure, and if it's all right with council, I kind of combined Ordinance 7, 8, and 9 together in my presentation because they all relate to the same thing, essentially.
Okay, and Ordinance 8 is a second reading amending the 2018 Littleton Sewer Utility Enterprise Budget, and Ordinance 9 is a second reading amending the 2018 Littleton Stormwater and Flood Management Utility Enterprise Budget. We will hold separate public hearings on all three, but we'll accept this as a kind of a joint presentation.
Sure. Good evening, Council. I do apologize. The PowerPoint does say first reading on March 6th, but obviously it's not March 6th, so I do apologize for that. Council, before you tonight, you have three ordinances, Ordinance 7, 8, 9. They're all related to the reappropriation of carryover encumbrances. This is something that historically just naturally occurs through the budget process and through the closing of the year. But one thing that we discussed at the council meetings, or the budget meetings in September, is that we would like myself would like to actually formally reappropriate these encumbrances. So the three questions essentially are, does council support the amendment to the 2018 annual appropriation? There's several funds that are involved. Two of them have to be separate because they're enterprise funds. So that's why you have resolution or ordinance 8 and 9 for the sewer fund and the storm drainage fund. A little background, each year staff prepares purchase orders to encumber funds from the current year budget. That could be purchasing uniforms. We might have a budget of, let's say, $90,000 to purchase uniforms, and we go ahead and contract with that provider of those uniforms, but for whatever reason, we're not able to either get them delivered to the city or paid for by the end of that fiscal year. And so a purchase order essentially encumbers those funds that get carried into the next year. There's a lot of goods and services that affects. It could be a street project. It could be an open space project through South Platte Park. There's a number of items, and for your information, we did give you a complete list of all of those open purchase orders at the end of 2017. As I mentioned earlier, this would just actually formally reappropriate those funds into the 2018 budget. Just a little information. As I mentioned, street rehab projects, open space projects, uniforms, several professional services. And the total for all funds that are involved is about $1.28 million. And just so council is aware, these expenses were calculated into our 2017 estimates when we did the 2018 budget. So there's definitely enough fund balance to cover those. Options, you can approve the amendment and essentially just to reappropriate the expenditures with the budget, or you don't have to approve the amendment. The total fiscal impact, as I mentioned, was about $1.28 million. That's all funds that this is going to make an adjustment to. And again, there's adequate fund balance for those amendments. One thing I do want to mention is that on Ordinance 7, the total that I had for all funds was incorrect. So I did make an adjustment on this second reading. So the total I had was $88,795,000. It actually should have been $87,539,237. So I do want to make that note for you. I do apologize. I had accidentally hit enter twice, so I added the 1.2 million twice. I hope that does not happen again, and I sincerely apologize. Staff does recommend the approval of this ordinance on second reading. So, Council, if you have any questions.
Any questions? Karina?
Tiffany, can you give us a sense of, what the trend has been in the past, like how much usually carries over from one year into another?
I would say that the trend is kind of like building use tax revenues to the city. It depends. It's all over the board. I believe last year in total, I do have that with me. Last year, the total was actually about $5 million. So this year, it's only about 1.3 million total. One thing that I know that staff and finance has been doing is to ensure that purchase orders are closed once the project is finished so that the budget can be released for the departments. So we've really been working with the departments to ensure that the encumbrances that are carried over are true and accurate and are tied to actual contracts that have been approved or signed.
And then the second question, we did see a couple of weeks back that there was about $400,000 from infrastructure projects. So is that the 326 that I see in capital projects here?
It is not, actually. The 400,000 is going to be above and beyond this. We didn't have an actual contract in place at the end of the year for that particular project, that traffic signal. It was related to a couple of traffic signals. So that one, we didn't have a contract in place, so it was not included in these numbers. I do anticipate in April that we will be bringing to council another amendment for the 2018 budget to have the $400,000 added.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Tiffany.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll open the public hearing at 6:50. Clerk, was there a sign-in sheet?
You know, workout today. She is. She did a little meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, no one has signed up to speak on this public hearing. Is there anybody who would like to, who didn't sign up? Okay. Seeing no one, I'll close the public meeting at 6:51. And council, ask if you have any additional questions, any comments? Okay, are you ready for a motion? Can we get a motion?
I move to approve the ordinance on a second reading, amending ordinance number 23, series 2017, known as the annual appropriation bill.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are you ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, ordinance on second reading, amending the 2018 Littleton Sewer Utility Enterprise Budget. Public hearing is now open at 6:51. We have no one who has signed up to speak on that. Is there anyone who might be interested? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing at 6:51. And council, any additional questions, comments? Need a motion, please?
I move to approve the ordinance on second reading amending the 2018 Littleton Sewer Utility Enterprise Budget.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are you ready to vote?
Yep.
The vote
Oh, sorry.
is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, this is second reading, amending the 2018 Littleton Stormwater and Flood Management Utility Enterprise Budget. Public hearing opens at 6:52. There's no one signed up on the sheet. Anyone wish to speak to this? Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing at 6:52. Council, any questions or comments? Okay, I need a motion, please.
I move to approve the ordinance on second reading amending the 2018 Littleton Stormwater and Flood Management Utility Enterprise Budget. Second.
Okay, we have a motion seconded by Councilmember Cole. Ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, our next public hearing is an ordinance on second reading amending Title 6, Chapter 1 of the Municipal Code to provide for the safety and protection of wildlife. We'll have a presentation from our city attorney, Mr. Kemp.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This came to you previously on a first read, and at that point, the council referred it to a study session. And based on the comments in that study session, a revised ordinance was prepared and submitted back to the council on first read. The purpose of this is to address in designated wildlife habitats the issues involving the harassment of wildlife. And harassment is actually defined both in the ordinance as well as by state statute. And these are basically practices that involve people doing everything from flying drones over nests to actually driving vehicles in the nest and to essentially destroy wildlife habitats. So the question is, why is this necessary? Because the current city code is limited. It only makes it a crime to actually destroy a bird's nest. Any other harassment of wildlife is not a crime under the city code. And yes, the Colorado Department of Natural Resources Division of Wildlife does have enforcement authority, generally the primary enforcement authority in wildlife habitats located in the city, such as along the South Platte, will be South Suburban Parks and Recreation, which enforces our code. And so the questions come up, does this prevent me from hazing wildlife that is a nuisance at my house? And the answer is no. Hazing wildlife that is on private property outside a wildlife habitat can be addressed by the property owner as they see fit. Some of questions were asked, what about if I accidentally hit wildlife? If you accidentally hit wildlife, that is not harassment of wildlife, and it's not covered by this code. What this code amendment does is a very, very, very narrow spectrum, which is to deal with the harassment of wildlife in designated habitat areas. Most of that in Littleton is going to be along the South Platte. Now, conceivably, sometimes property owners may designate their private property either through zoning or conservation easement as a wildlife habitat. But most of this will be done through the designations along the South Platte. And the question comes up as well, does this apply to things like domestic animals? No, those are not wildlife. Wildlife is really things like coyotes, foxes, geese. And geese, incidentally, are protected by federal law. So as I think everyone acknowledges geese can be quite a nuisance, but even independent of this ordinance, geese are protected by federal law. And the intent here is to simply give us a tool to address this. Now, some people have said, well, does this mean the police are going to go out and enforce wildlife? No, the police won't. The primary enforcement entity, as I mentioned, will be South Suburban Parks and Recreation. I can tell you from having represented parks departments my whole career, they are very much what I'd call compliance focused. If you just comply with the rules, they will be satisfied. Parks departments are not generally in the same enforcement focus as you might find other entities. And we have had this reviewed by South Suburban's lawyers. They are in total agreement with it. We have also had it reviewed by the Department of Wildlife. And I do know that Councilmember Cole had a question about the hazing definition. I did pass out to you a revision which could be entertained. This revision comes from the city of Lone Tree, and they and the Department of Wildlife actually jointly adopted a coyote management plan on how they would manage coyotes within their city. And so the Department of Wildlife actually approved the Lone Tree definition. So certainly if council wished to substitute the Lone Tree definition in this ordinance for the current definition, that would be acceptable, I'm certain, with the Division of Wildlife, Department of Natural Resources. Now, some other concerns came up at the study session or subsequent to the study or prior to the study session. One of those concerns being that how is this going to impact on private property? And the answer is it will not prevent a private property owner from hazing wildlife on private property. Now, what is hazing? Hazing is really the simple definition. It's making wildlife so uncomfortable they go somewhere else. It can be loud noise. I remember we used to have wildlife and we would put mothballs out. And for whatever reason that worked. That's hazing. Hazing is not traps, poison, and things that are harmful. It's things that would just cause wildlife to leave. And hazing by property owners is protected because we realize we live in an area that was once a wildlife habitat but now is an urban area. And so we realize this need to coexist with our wildlife. We all love looking at it, but we certainly don't like it when a coyote comes into our yard and does damage. And so that's the recognition behind hazing. One of the other issues was, what happens if there is a conviction? And the answer is, we did modify the forfeiture provisions. I know Councilmember Fay had raised an issue about that. We since looked at some different statutes that I think are more appropriate. We made that modification. And it is my recommendation to you, whether you wish to substitute the Lone Tree language as a council decision, my recommendation to you is that, yes, you adopt this ordinance. I do believe, as both the lawyer and from a prosecution standpoint, we need to have this tool in the city code. And with that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions that you have.
Council, any questions?
Yeah, I have.
Jerry?
So hazing is human initiated. So if a goose
Yes.
comes after me and I hit it with my lacrosse stick, is that considered hazing?
If you didn't do damage to the goose, if you simply took a hose and sprayed the goose with water and to the point where the goose was so agitated it left, that's hazing. But if
Well,
you
I
take
probably
a-
won't have a hose with me while I'm in the park.
Yes.
But if geese can be a little bit aggressive.
Yeah, they can be very-
If give it a poke to go away.
You can give it a poke, that would be acceptable hazing.
Okay.
Hazing, you just can't do damage to it. The idea is to make the wildlife so uncomfortable it leaves.
Talking bad to it, will that hurt it?
Yeah, if that
Have
would
a
work.
pretty soft culture these days, society these days. I don't want to hurt its feelings.
I will acknowledge my daughter got bit by a goose in a park, and I gave it a modest nudge with my foot as a way of encouraging it to find somewhere else to bite. So,
Well, self-protection is not considered hazing. That's okay.
well, it was. Let's just say I actively hazed the goose, and that the hazing is protected.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
In the ordinance, it talks about the definition of wildlife and the wildlife habitat in particular. So I just want to be clear that this applies, this hazing or harassment, only when it infringes or occurs in a wildlife habitat, which would be, in our case, South Platte Park, or if there's a private property owner.
Councilmember Elrod, members of the council, that's correct. This ordinance is designed to only apply to those areas. Now, I would tell you, the State of Colorado Department of Natural Resources has adopted regulations that they recognize the rights of property owners, even on their private property, to haze wildlife. This doesn't interfere with that. It's designed to be a companion. But yes, this ordinance applies to wildlife habitats only. But under those state regulations, if a goose came into your backyard and was becoming quite a nuisance, you could, under those regulations, haze the goose and encourage it to go find somewhere else to be a nuisance.
Okay.
Any other questions? No? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, this is a public hearing, so we'll go ahead and open the public hearing at 7:02. And I have two people signed up to speak. Don Bruns.
Good evening, council members. I had the privilege of meeting with Attorney Kemp several days back to discuss concerns that I'd sent to all council several days ago. Mr. Kemp approached me following the last council meeting, agreeing to meet and explaining that Councilmember Elrod had indicated my interest in the ordinance. So thanks very much to each of you. This evening, I've also handed out hard copies of those earlier remarks simply for the record. I'm grateful that the city has limited the scope of this ordinance to designated wildlife habitat, and for having learned it is your desire to leave enforcement of state wildlife nuisance regulations to Colorado Parks and Wildlife. As you saw in those earlier comments, some confusion about how limited that scope actually is to be seemed to remain in the ordinance's verbiage. Mr. Kemp indicated those comments were helpful and assured me the city would ensure the ordinance intended scope would be made clear. Thank you again very much. We also discussed the third matter raised in those earlier comments, that is, the continued erosion of wildlife habitat accompanying approval of developments that bring increased levels of urbanization to our city. This is a major concern, whether it's a loss of hardwood tree canopies from downtown, for example, removing songbird habitat and therefore songbirds, or improvement of multi-story structures encroaching to the very edge of parks and greenways, for example, pushing back fox and other predator habitat and therefore the wildlife we rely on to keep vermin in check, or just simply human social intrusion of people increasingly desensitized to the natural world that adjoins shopping centers, for example, directly intimidating those wildlife. I was therefore also glad to hear Mr. Kemp seem to affirm that this is something needing our attention if Littleton is to keep what makes Littleton, Littleton. So I'll close with a short illustrative story. When we moved here from Denver, an office colleague from Lakewood remarked, "Wow, Don, you are moving into a wonderful community." Bystanders listening to the conversation asked why. She said, "Littleton is known for its great urban forests, open space, and its special downtown." Then she remarked further, "You guys are making a really good move." I hope that verdict can remain true, but it appears to be threatened. In character development could go a long way towards making it less so. Please be encouraged in every way possible to search out new ways to be good stewards of what makes us whom we are. And I notice I have another 30 seconds, so I'm going to tell you a little saying. One of my favorite Walt Disney sayings goes like this: "The more you are like yourself, the less you are like anyone else, which makes you unique." Problem is, most people spend all their time emulating others, which means we have lots of copies and very few originals. Disney has lost what made it special, and Walt's no longer there. But we don't have to lose what makes Littleton special, because we are an original. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hear, hear.
Thank you.
Pam Chadbourne?
Good evening, Council. Again, my name is Pam Chadbourne, and I live a block and a half from here. So a few comments about this. I, unlike others, am sorry that this was watered down and weakened so much. It's not just wildlife that needs protection, although Don did a good job of saying that's part of our community, or has been up to now. I'm convinced it's really vanishing and is pretty much over, but it's also to prevent human conflict. And the thing is, when you see someone treating an animal badly, or when I see someone, let me speak for myself, treating an animal badly, I feel angry, upset. I have problems with that. Now, if I can only call South Suburban Parks and Rec and they get there the next day, that's not going to solve the human conflict. I am not a person who's probably a danger to people I see harassing wildlife, but there are probably people who are. And that is the city's interest in having stronger enforcement for things like this. It's because it prevents human conflict as well as degradation of wildlife. So, South Suburban Parks and Rec is nice, but it is not adequate enforcement. Littleton Police should be enabled to respond in serious instances, and they should have the right to take harassing equipment, such as drones, if it's being used in an outrageous way. And I trust our police to judge that. I trust them to figure that out. So that should be in this ordinance. It's okay to do. Also, I live near the river, and I've seen a decline in wildlife. I do, not rabbits, the coyotes and foxes are gone, the predators are gone in my area. Now, I know that they still exist in some areas, but because of the development upstream, it's not going to continue. And that's not even to mention the pollinators, and Councilmember Hopping is no longer here, but he would care about that. We're losing our native population, and there's nothing in our codes and nothing in our plans that says we're going to add to our considerations in our documentation the impact on wildlife habitat. So let me say that when we're making frameworks and saying we're going to plan and we're going to do this, in every one of them we ought to have something where staff is required to bring an impact of wildlife into that deliberation. They need to quantify it, estimate it, describe it to us for your deliberation, for your decisions. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Pam. Those are the speakers that have signed up. Is there anybody else who would like to make a comment? Okay, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing at 7:09. Council, any questions?
Yeah, I have a question for the attorney. Will this ordinance allow the police to, if there's a situation that they would need to confront a harasser of wildlife?
Councilmember Schlachter, members of the council, yes. This ordinance, because it is recognized as a misdemeanor, both the police and South Suburban could enforce. And I want to make that clear. Even though South Suburban may be the primary entity, certainly our police department, as necessary, could be involved as well. And one other item that came up in the public hearing that I think is important to know, which is as council has indicated its desire to proceed through a visioning and comp plan update, usually in many those you will have a sensitive lands provision that will look at these very types of things and how we preserve these habitats for the future. So I recognize that that will be part of what council will be doing through the visioning and comp plan process, and certainly we will be addressing that in those processes as we proceed.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Seeing no questions, I need a motion, please.
I move to approve the ordinance on second reading amending Title VI, Chapter 1 of the Municipal Code to provide for the safety and protection of wildlife.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
I'd like
Councilmember
to amend.
Cole.
Amend. The city attorney did share with us something from the definition of, from Lone Tree on hazing. So I'll read it, but I'm going to omit one word. So I think you all have this. Definition of hazing is and I'm deleting the word training.
Councilmember Cole, can you speak up just a little bit?
Pull your mic
I'm
closer.
sorry.
Thank you.
Better? Hazing is a training method that employs, and I want to delete the word training. So hazing is a method that employs immediate use of deterrence to move an animal out of an area or discourage an undesirable behavior or activity. Hazing techniques include loud noises, spraying water, bright lights, throwing non-edible objects, shouting. Hazing can help maintain a coyote's fear of humans and deter them from neighborhood spaces such as backyards and play spaces. Hazing does not do damage to animals, humans, or property. That was a motion to amend.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Can I amend the amendment?
I have a question for the attorney on this one.
One moment. Okay, one person gets the floor. Jerry, you may have the floor.
So on training, how important is having training in there?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem?
On training, the word that she would like to omit. How important is it to have that in there?
Deterrence versus methods. Either one is satisfactory. This language was negotiated by the City of Lone Tree and the Department of Wildlife. So I think deterrence methods, I don't, those two words, I think either word works.
So the reason that I deleted it, it sounds as though we're bringing the animals in and you know, a more formal kind of way of doing something. But if it's a method to achieve something, it implies some kind of systematic, intentional behavior.
Thank you.
Council, I'm fine with either word. I'm fine with. I think either word will be satisfactory as far as the Division of Wildlife is concerned.
Councilmember Schlechter.
I just had a question about adding in the second sentence, hazing techniques include, after the word, or changing the word include to including but not limited to loud noises, spraying water.
Again, I see no problem with that. These tend to be the common ones recommended by the Department of Natural Resources Division of Wildlife, but frankly, the goal of hazing is basically to make it uncomfortable for wildlife. So I suppose if you want to play, if you don't like rap music, you might turn up the rap music loud and see if that drives them away. The reality of it is they look at literally any method that makes wildlife uncomfortable as an acceptable method.
I just wanted to make sure Jerry's poking geese with sticks was included in there.
No, I'd do more than poke it.
And then I believe.
Okay, Councilmember Elrod.
And I have one more. On the second to last sentence, hazing can help maintain a coyote's fear of humans. So I want to strike the specification of coyotes and put animals.
Why don't we use wildlife's fear of
Wildlife.
human? Mayor, you have 3 amendments on the floor. My recommendation would be that you take the amendments to the amendments, and if they fail, then they
Yeah, I got it.
vote, and then you vote on the amendment.
If the maker of the motion believes it's a friendly amendment, then we don't have to do that, do we?
No, the motion now belongs to the floor. The motion belongs to the body. So we'll have to go ahead. We'll go ahead and we'll go through procedure.
Let's
Yeah,
wordsmith
I think we have the.
Yeah, we're Is there any other additional additions to the additional amendment that's addition to the 4th time we've heard the wild? We good? Okay.
Okay.
So let's start with Karina. Will you please make an amendment?
So am I,
Make an amendment to add, to make your word change, please.
okay. So I make a motion to amend the definition of hazing to read is a training method that employs immediate use of deterrence. Am I reading it as is and with my change?
You can just make your specific change to it.
Okay.
The clerk will grab it.
So an amendment to change the following statement. Hazing can help maintain a wildlife fear of humans.
Okay. Need a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to change coyotes to wildlife. Ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, Councilmember Schlechter.
I move to amend the amendment to have the second sentence read, hazing techniques include but are not limited to loud noises.
Okay, we need a second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ready to vote?
Okay, Peggy.
Driscoll.
I did, I thought. Sorry.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, you guys, we're almost there. Okay, back to the original
Now, Mayor, I
amendment.
believe you have the
The
core
original amendment,
on the
which
floor.
was to remove the word training, has been amended to replace coyotes with wildlives and to include the phraseology, including but not limited to loud noises. We are voting on the amendment as amended and amended.
I'm sorry. Can you hold on just a minute?
Yes, clerk.
Are we taking the word training out?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay.
You read training into it, and I wasn't sure.
I was corrected.
Okay, got it. I'm on
Okay.
it.
Ready to vote?
Yep.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Now we're back to the main motion.
We already have it.
And the main motion, yes, is to approve the second reading. We did make a main motion, didn't we, Wendy? Yes, okay. Second reading amending Title 6, Chapter 1 of the Municipal Code to provide for the safety and protection of wildlife as amended. Ready and amended and amended. Ready to vote?
I have a comment.
Okay.
We haven't had a discussion yet, have we?
No. Go ahead.
Well, devil in the details again. As the attorney pointed out, I had an objection to the reference to the Colorado State revised statute that he cited before, which was about organized crime. And it turns out that the one he cited this time is about contraband. That means drugs. And so we have ourselves where if somebody looks this up, or if it actually goes to a hearing where somebody gets picked up on this, we're going to have some problems, because he cites 16-13-505. And what that says is no judgment of forfeiture of property. So this is about forfeiture of property. In any forfeiture proceedings shall be entered unless and until the owner of the property is convicted of an offense involving the conduct listed in 16-13-503. And if you look at 16-13-503, it's engaging in the unlawful manufacture, cultivation, growth, production, processing, or distribution for sale of or storing any unlawful manufacture and so on of any controlled substance or any other drug. So it's clear that this is about drugs, and then Part B is engaging in the unlawful manufacture, sale, distribution of drug paraphernalia. So what we seem to have here is a reference to a state statute for forfeiture of drugs and related property for the forfeiture of items used in the harassment of wildlife. And then another thing going on here, I think, is that there's a furthermore. Those sections say that district court, not municipal court, shall be the original court of the jurisdiction for the forfeiture hearings. I think the original reading, the reason that we had this, one of them, this whole ordinance, was that South Suburban Parks District would not enforce the state wildlife harassment laws unless there was something in the municipal code. So then what we've done is come around full circle, and if they use this, then forfeiture takes us back to drugs and paraphernalia, and that the action then the local code, this ordinance refers us to a statute which requires that it go to district court rather than municipal court. It seems like we are creating a problem once again, not for whether we are in favor of preventing the harassment of wildlife. That's not the issue. The issue is how silly do we look in our reference to state statutes, and why would we want to refer to something that has nothing to do with wildlife and then have it go to district court?
Councilmember Fay, members of the council, I looked at a number of the different forfeiture statutes, and sort of let me walk you through this. Generally in Colorado, the municipal court only has criminal jurisdiction. It doesn't have civil jurisdiction. In fact, the only civil jurisdiction it has is for a case arising out of a violation of the city's charter or code, and meaning a civil case that arises. For forfeitures arising out of the criminal code, which is what this would be, the district court in the state has jurisdiction. So we could not have forfeiture in the municipal court. The second part of this is, why did I cite to the drug statute? Because of all the statutes in Colorado on forfeiture, it provides the property owner with the most protection. Some statutes allow for what we call pre-judgment forfeiture, where you can actually forfeit the property prior to a conviction. This requires allows for forfeiture only after a conviction. Yes, the statute cites to the reference in 16-503, but in this code, the purpose of the statute, it simply states that a forfeiture is to be done in accordance with this statute. And the idea there is to provide the district court with guidance as to how the forfeiture proceedings would be handled. Because if we didn't provide reference to this, the district court would be sitting there going, well, okay, this forfeiture is arising under the city code, but we're not sure exactly which forfeiture statute statute we would look at. This is really designed to make sure that the district court's discretion is specific and limited. So I certainly appreciate Councilmember Fay's concern. We are definitely not forfeiting drugs in this case, but the whole purpose of this is really just to provide the court, as it says, any forfeiture pursuant to this title, meaning Title VI of the code, is to be done in accordance with the provisions of the state statute. It's meant to provide the district court with guidance for doing that. It's kind of an unusual thing here where we'd have forfeiture in one court and a conviction in another, but it does happen with misdemeanors. If this was a felony, it's always going to, the whole proceeding would be in district court. But because it's a misdemeanor, not a felony, this does happen.
Council, other questions, comments? Councilmember Fay, did you want to?
Nothing more, thanks.
Okay. Okay, no additional questions or comments. We do have a motion on the floor. And Council, any other discussion, or are we ready to vote?
I'm ready.
Okay. Motion approves on second reading the municipal code for safety and protection of wildlife.
Cool.
The vote is 6 in favor, with Councilmember Fay voting no. The motion carries 6-1.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that concludes our public hearings, and we are at comments and reports. City Manager?
No report, Mayor.
Okay. City Attorney?
No report, Mayor.
Councilmember Cole?
No report.
Councilmember Driscoll?
Yes, I attended the LIFT board meeting last week. It was a short meeting, unfortunately. It wasn't fully attended, but really there wasn't much discussion around the policies and procedure of LIFT. It really discussed mainly about just redoing the website so it's more user-friendly, so I can appreciate that. Also, I just want to remind people on April 12th, Littleton Business Chamber will be having a meeting, a member meeting over at the Littleton Town building right around the corner.
Thank you. Councilmember Valdez?
Nothing.
Nothing. Councilmember Schlechter?
First, I want to wish everyone a happy first day of spring today. So we're out of winter now. And apologize for being late today. I was watching my son's first grade performance that lasted from 6:15 to 6:35. One council-related item, I attended Youth Leadership Jefferson County last week. It's a leadership program that Jefferson County puts on, that they have high school students from the entire county come together. It's a 6-month program, and that was their government day, so I sat on a panel of city council members from around the area, and it was a great experience, so I thought it'd be great to participate in that, and there were some really good students in that, and I'd like to see if we can do something like that in the future here.
Great. Councilmember Fay?
District 3 is having a quarterly district meeting on April 21st. That's a Saturday, starting at 9:30 at the Littleton Historical Museum. It'll include a behind-the-scenes tour of the Littleton Museum.
Thank you. Councilmember Elrod?
I do have an update. I attended the fly-in to DC hosted by the South Metro Chamber of Commerce, so I have a little update from that trip. That was Thursday and Friday of last week. The contingent that went from Colorado were council members or mayors from Lone Tree, Centennial, Littleton, myself, and then we also had RTD there. Chamber of Commerce or economic development groups from Parker, Douglas, and South Metro, and then business leaders from Lockheed, in the industries of law, insurance, healthcare, and higher education. So really great, diverse group, and with the focus of really bringing the agenda of the South Metro region, which some of the areas that we focused on were transportation, energy, commerce, health and human services. We met with the departments, so Department of Transportation, Department of Energy, Health and Human Services. We met with all of the members of, I think we met with all of the members of our Colorado delegation, Bennett, Kaufman, DeGette, Perlmutter, Buck, and Gardner. And we also met with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and we met with members from the executive office as well. So really packed 2 days. The key messages that came out on transportation, there is an infrastructure bill that's out there. and got some really good, tangible actions, advice, recommendations on how to position projects as they come forward, looking for partnership and support from the federal side as well, as that is going to maybe be lower than expectations have been in the past. And the number of things that I will sit down with staff to go through my notes and items so that we can bring it to council for some action. The other one that I was very happy to bring forward was our project and proposal that we have with the conversion to biogas. And that was actually received very well. And the head of Energy and Environment of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce asked for some talking points and notes of what we're doing here in Littleton. So I think that's great to be able to kind of feed that up. And then the other great thing is some of these senior advisors, to Don's point, one was DJ Gribben, he's the special assistant to the president on infrastructure, says he loves Littleton. And the Department of Transportation, he actually grew up, he's like, again, one of those long titles. He was fantastic. He grew up in Larkspur. His mom lives in Ken Carl, so he visits this area very often and was very much, aware of the challenges we had. So good to have that connection to people that can help us navigate the process.
Excellent.
The other thing, sorry, one more thing. And one of the other messages that came out, there's a big focus back on space commerce, and there is a new Space Council that has been, or the bringing back the Space Council at the executive level, and we have an invitation from Citizens for Space Exploration to attend the 34th Space Symposium that's happening in Colorado Springs, April 17th, 18th, and 19th. I'll send this flyer through to all of council and staff for those interested. This came from Lockheed Martin, obviously is a huge supporter of this, and it was really good to see the focus in this industry, knowing that we have Lockheed in our backyard. They have some supporting businesses and suppliers in South Park, so really important for the economic health for Littleton. So that's all I have.
I do want to thank you, Councilmember Elrod, for taking that trip to D.C. Those are very important, and I think having Littleton there being represented is crucial, particularly when we are looking at these incredibly challenging and expensive infrastructure projects everywhere. And so being there and getting some face time and making some connections, and also the relationship building with our partners in the South Metro area. So thank you very much for doing that. We're looking forward to it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. I have no report this evening, and if that's it, we are adjourned. And council, just don't forget the Friday breakfast. No, it's this Friday.
Oh, it is this Friday. That's right. It is this Friday.
Breakfast at the museum.
Great.